Hello and welcome to episode 145 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and this is a bit of a rare thing. We are recording this episode before we've put up episode 144. I'm just kind of recording back to back, and the reason for that is because we just had one of the biggest trades in years, I think. Certainly one of the most surprising.
Yeah, it was big. Ruthvik finally traded away Davis Schneider. And I mean, like, look, he got rid of Helio Ramos and then he got rid of Davis Schneider. Like, is he finally becoming like a good owner? Does he finally know what he's doing?
He might. I mean, Davis Schneider, I'm kind of surprised he was moved at all. Um, kind of crazy that he was included in the deal. Um, Ruthvik moving on from some pieces here, but no, of course, the real um, surprise here, Spencer Strider traded to Jake's team, of course, and we're gonna talk about this a lot more, and we are going to be interviewing one of the teams involved in this deal later on, so we'll kind of keep it brief on this side of the break. But yeah, Spencer Strider, for and I called it. I knew Yamamoto was going to end up on Zane's team by the end of the offseason. So it must have come together really quickly here. I'm sure Zane was asking probably even before the draft. Um, but yeah, now Zane's got Yamamoto plus a few other guys. Um, and the defending champion, two-time defending champion Jake now has maybe the best dynasty starting pitcher in the league. And yeah, we'll get to all that. We've got several other trades to get to first. I think we do.
We do, yeah. Let's attack this in order of when they happen, starting with the earliest trade. So the first trade, this is the first trade since the draft. Um, this was one of my deals. Mount Rushmore agreed to trade Anthony's 2027 second round pick, its 2029 second round pick, Cam's 2027 third round pick, and my 2029 third round pick to EBO for Christopher Sanchez. First off, you Zane and you really played me here and got me to give up more than I was hoping to. So shout out to both of you for that. I was a little annoyed by that, but I still think this is a very fair price for Christopher Sanchez. Um, I mean, he had an awesome year, kind of came out of nowhere for the Phillies, and I had my eye on him in the middle of the season. He was in my watch list, and then EBO picked him up and just never dropped him. Uh, 99 in the third innings, at 870 K per nine, very solid, 145 walk per nine, which is elite. I mean, he's got really good control. He had an elevated homer nine. It was 145. And you might be like, hey, okay, this is cause for concern. But one of the things I really liked with him is that if you look at his homer to fly ball rate of all pitchers who pitched at 90 plus innings, he had by far the highest homer nine. But it came with a ground ball rate that was the fourth highest, which to me suggested that he got a little bit unlucky. And that with a homer to fly ball rate that's a little more normal, I think it could keep that ERA down and kind of stave off any potential regression that comes from, hey, batters kind of adjust to him, teams have a little more game planning, try to figure it out, but figure him out a bit. But um, for somebody who has a low fastball velocity, I mean, he had a 97% chase rate last year. I mean, all the numbers under the hood seem very solid. The Phillies have made it very clear that they're committed to him, throughout the offseason. They're excited for him to take hold of one of these rotation spots. And, it's hard to get young starting pitching in this league. And, I think I paid a pretty decent price to get a 27-year-old who was very solid last year. But at the same time, if he doesn't really pan out, then I can cut him. And yeah, I'll be mad about giving up a couple second round picks, but I don't think it's really going to hurt me at the end of the day. So to gamble on him as like my SP9 is something I feel really good about.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he's an interesting breakout candidate. Um, and yeah, the to kind of speak from my perspective here, Zane was offering, um, uh, kind of made it clear that there was an offer to beat for Sanchez, and it was 2 seconds. And I was kind of thinking, I can beat this. And then I kind of started to bid you up, and I very much knew I was bidding against you, but um, I kind of wanted to bid you up, and I like Sanchez. I would have been certainly happy to get him at the price of 2 seconds, but kind of being able to bid that up to 4 seconds was a win on its own,
But
because it
2 seconds and 2/3.
2 seconds and 2/3. Okay, so
Yeah,
4 picks,
yeah.
um, from 2 picks, I suppose that was, yeah, just a little bit more than I wanted to do, but being able to bid you up to 4 picks, felt pretty great. And because of that, it, maybe made it harder for you to avoid giving up a first in another deal, which me and Andrew also bid you up during.
Yeah, I think giving up a first in this deal was inevitable. Although Zane was interested in a 2030 second and a 2031 second as a return for this deal. But in any event, I traded Kenta Maeda and my 2029 first round pick to EBO for Jake Berger. Berger's kind of at least for me, how I view him, like the Christopher Sanchez, but a hitter. He was a first round pick in 2017, dealt with some injury issues, dealt with some mental health issues, able to come up with the White Sox. Start of the year, elite power. I mean, the dude smacks the ball. It is, I mean, he's got like judgy and like power. And that's not something I throw around lightly. But what do I keep telling you about Jared Kelenic? You can't survive if you're going to strike out like a third of the time. It's just not going to work. Um, he had a really high strikeout rate to start the year. 29.2% in April, 29.2% in May, 40% in June. Then he gets traded. What do you start to see after that? 26.4% in July, gets a little lower. 21.3% in August. I like that. 22% in September. So it's a 33.5K% in the first half and a 22% K rate in the second half. A lot of the metrics back that up. Suggests that, hey, he was making better contact. Just a lot of the peripherals look very good. And that kind of motivated me to buy because it made me think, hey, this is the type of player who's on the upswing. Now, he hit for a little less power in Miami, and he is in a worse ballpark, but I think he has so much power where I think it'll play regardless of the park. I mean, realistically, I think he's like a 30 home run hitter. And if he can get that average, I mean, he hit 279 in the second half. I don't think he's quite going to hit 279. He did it with a 311 BABIP, although one thing I was reading and that I think is very fair is that you can have some of these bigger power hitters can hit for a higher BABIP than you would think, because they hit the ball so hard. So even if they hit it on the ground sometimes, I mean, it's very hard to catch up to 110, 115 mile per hour ground ball. But I think he can hit like 260, 265, and I think that would just be enough to get like a solid enough OBP, maybe something even like 320. And if he could do that with 30 some home runs, hitting in the middle of Miami lineup that's improving a bit, which I think can elevate the RBI numbers and the run numbers. I mean, I think he could arguably just be like a younger version of Max Muncy in terms of the impact he has on my roster. And for a 2029 first, someone who's literally probably in middle school right now, I'll take that gamble any day.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It really did feel a lot like the Christopher Sanchez deal. Not only this time, Andrew was also involved in bidding you up. I just kind of felt at a certain point, Yeah, I like Berger for all the reasons you said. He's another breakout candidate guy. Um, I felt like at a certain point the price was too high. Um, I asked Zane, I was like, who is Sahil even going to cut? He has too many guys on his roster. And then Zane said, oh, Sahil's probably going to cut Maeda. And I was like, okay, cool. I will let Sahil give up the first tier and I will just pick up Maeda even better. And then, unbeknownst to me, you included Maeda in the deal to Zane, so that kind of screwed me a little bit, but
Yeah,
it
so
happens.
Zane told me, "Hey, who are you gonna cut?" And then he's like, "Well, Cam wants Maeda. Like, if you're gonna cut him, can I just take him?" And I was like, "Well, I'd be glad to trade him to you, so Cam doesn't get him." I think was the exact words I used. So,
Man.
uh, you're welcome.
Yeah, Maeda would have been a good fit in my rotation now that I officially have Bueller on my IL. Um, Now that that's finally allowed, I jumped the gun a little bit the first time, but now he is allowed on my IL.
Yeah,
And that's where he is. I haven't picked up anyone yet to replace him. Sure would have been nice to have my Ada there. Either way, though, I feel satisfied that I bid you up to a first rounder, which, that's, and sure, it's a first rounder that's not going to be drafted for a long time, but it's a first rounder that you can't trade in another deal. So that's kind of kicking the can further down the road for you. That's one fewer first rounder you can use to trade for someone different.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I'll find unique ways around it, and I will say so. Andrew used my 2024 first round pick this year. That was a pick that he acquired back in 2020 in the Carlos Correa deal. Correa helped me win a championship that year, and I since have traded him to get Marcus Semien, who I'm very happy with. Andrew took Hurston Waldrop with that pick. I'm not really losing any sleep over that. Now, the situation could be entirely different in 2029, right? I think my team is going to look very different, but I mean, I'm in a aggressive win now mode right now, and whoever I would draft is in middle school right now. So, at some point, just kind of have to go for it and take it. And it's interesting too, because these aren't, last off season, I did make, a few of these moves on the side kind of for players that I really thought could break out and that I could gamble on because, I don't always have, you know, top-notch trade assets to move anymore because there's a lot of these players I want to keep. So, like last year I got, Saya Suzuki, Felix Bautista, Kyle Bradish. Those worked out very well for me, right? On the flip side, I also traded for Taylor Ward and Jorge Polanco. And those moves didn't work out as well. So I think these are worthwhile gambles to take. And, you're not going to win all of these gambles kind of, trying to get some of these guys on the edge. But, if one of these two guys is a big contributor to my team next year, I'll be very happy. So,
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I can't, I don't expect that either of them will be on your major league roster come opening day, but I'm sure you'll find something to do with them.
yeah, I don't know why everybody keeps saying that.
I mean, because that's what always happens.
Yeah,
Uh, Exhibit A, Bo Naylor.
I told you from the beginning I had an exact plan for Bo Naylor and I would be fine if he was on my team, but I knew he was going to be traded. In fact, I knew I wanted to give him the Connor. I don't have a plan here.
Well, you're not admitting to having a plan here.
Well, so and I will say, and I told Zane this, I was like, one of the reasons I was a little hesitant with Jake Berger, and he immediately forced my hand a bit, because he kind of put a shot clock on it, and he's like, well, I'm gonna make a trade before I go to bed. One of the things I told him is like, I like the player, I don't mind the price, but I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do with Jake Berger because it's one more at bat than I want. So if anybody's listening to this, I'm open to trading at bat. I think you all know that, but um,
Well,
uh,
right now, what's the price on Jake Berger? Let me see if it's something I'm interested in.
um, I mean, part of the problem is like figuring out what's equivalent to a 2029 first round pick is not the easiest thing to do. Um, but I probably want like prospects or picks, honestly, or like to package him off with like another bat for something else.
I mean, I got plenty of prospects and picks, so
We'll talk off air.
All right. But yes, so those are the first couple deals that you made. Let's move on then to the next deal, which was made um trade number, oh God,
605.
605. This was an interesting one. So EBO sent Bryce Miller, Connor Norby, and a second rounder, Anthony's 2027 second, back to Anthony for Sandy Alcantara. So uh, EBO now owns Sandy Alcantara. Anthony owned it for one season, decided to move on. That experiment, wasn't the best, unfortunately. Um, yeah, rough season for Sandy Alcantara in his season after the Cy Young. He dealt with injury. Um, did he have Tommy John? Yeah, he's gonna miss the entire 2024 season. So with that in mind, um, uh, not a bad return for Anthony, I would say. Um, I mean, Norby is solid. Bryce Miller was kind of hyped going into this year. I don't think it was the best season for him.
He
And I
was
guess this is
fine.
EBO kind of playing for 2025 here, kind of seeing, um, kind of looking ahead towards the future, seeing, hey, in 2025, maybe Ruthvik's not a playoff team, or maybe Eric's not a playoff team, or maybe I'm not a playoff team. EBO could be a top four team in 2025 if a lot breaks right for them in 2024, and having Sandy Alcantara jump in that rotation could be cool for them.
Yeah, so I'll admit I had a strong opinion about this. Not a strong opinion, but I had one opinion about this trade when it was first made, and then I kind of broke it down a little bit, and I'm a little less sure about my initial opinion. What I do like a lot about Sandy Alcantara is that he has been a workhorse. I mean, uh, last year, 184 and two thirds. I know he got hurt at the end of the season, but 228 and two thirds the year before, 205 and two thirds in 21, 197 and a third in 2019. Like, dude's a horse. Um, I'm a little bit concerned by the skills degradation in 23. Now, perhaps that's injury. I'm not really sure. It was still a fine season. I mean, 4.14 ERA, 4.03 FIP, but the K rate came down. It just wasn't quite right. And he was never like a dominating strikeout guy. Um, it was always kind of, hey, he puts up the volume, he gets deep into games, and that's where his value comes from. So a little bit of my concern there is like, hey, if things shift a little bit, right? If they're not perfect, right? His K rate didn't drop by that much, but it dropped from 815 in 2022 to 736 last year. That's not particularly good. The walk rate went up a little bit from 197 to 234. The home run rate went up quite a bit from 0.63 to 107, right? That's not, other than the home run rate, those aren't crazy margins for things to change. There's also a 25-point increase in this BABIP. But that was enough kind of to throw things off. So I'm a little worried that maybe that ace upside isn't quite there and he's already had his best season. At the same time, I look at Bryce Miller, and I like Bryce Miller. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the most impressive season last year when you kind of dig deep into it. I don't, maybe there's a next step. I mean, he had a 4.32 ERA and a 3.98 FIP, 815 K per nine, 178 walk per nine, 123 home run per nine. I mean, that looks a lot like what Sandy Alcantara's done. Um, but I don't know if there's really a next step for Miller. Um, so while on one hand, Alcantara has the Cy Young season and he's shown like a ridiculous amount of that he can put up a ridiculous amount of innings when healthy. I mean, he's not healthy while Miller, I'm not 100% sure if he's going to take the next step, and he hasn't shown that he can handle the inning load that Alcantara can, but he is healthy. So it's a weird gamble, and I just like, I think it's fine for what both of them want, for what Anthony wants and for what Zane wants, but it feels like such a weird trade and kind of I think initially I was all on this for EBO, and now I'm a little less certain. And I think to mention the other pieces, I guess like Norby's fine. He's still blocked in Baltimore, even with Joey Ortiz getting traded to Milwaukee in the Burns deal. But um, I I don't really know if he's going to be a huge fantasy impact guy. Like I think he'll be solid, but I don't know if I'm looking at him as like an elite fantasy asset or anything. And then the 2027 seconds it's a pick, like it's fine, but I don't know. These are two pitchers that really interest me, but I don't really know what to make of them. So I tend to think this deal might be a little more even than I thought initially, but it's what maybe the weirdest trade that's been made all off season.
I agree. I think it is kind of a weird trade. Um, and I think it's one that, could end up looking really good for Anthony. Without a lot changing. It could also just kind of be a total nothing trade, or it could be a terrible one for Anthony. We will see. Up next is the big one. This is one we've teased. It's Spencer Strider, two bow with the flow for Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Matt McLean, Marcelo Meyer, and Jake's upcoming first rounder, presumably towards the end of the first round. Again, we're going to be very brief on this because we'll be interviewing Zane and Sully later in this episode. But let's talk briefly about it here because it's interesting. I mean, on one hand, Jake is getting the number one young pitcher in the league right now. On the other hand, I mean, maybe EBO is getting the number one young pitcher in the league. We Yamamoto was just given the largest pitching contract in Major League history by the smartest team in baseball right now. Um, we were talking about this off air. If he busts, it'll be injury, not stuff, because his stuff is really solid. And to also get Matt McLean and a top uh, tier prospect and a first rounder feels like a pretty big haul for EBO.
Yeah, I think it's a really good haul for EVO, right? It's hard to trade those elite talents, top 20 dynasty asset, but if you're gonna do it, this is the type of package you need to receive to move somebody like that. So I think EVO did a great job of doing that. Now, did they need to do this move? I don't think so. Was this a good opportunity that presented itself? Potentially. It's I see both sides of the argument here with this deal. I mean, if you think and I think it really hinges on Yamamoto, right? If Yamamoto ends up being, the top five, top 10 dynasty starting pitcher, like a lot of people think he can be, coupled with the fact that I think Matt McLean's a top five dynasty second baseman, and with some of the guys aging out there, I think he's only going to move up into the top three. Like I think Meyer to Shine's kind of come off a little bit, but I still think he's a top 50 dynasty prospect, and a first round pick's a first round pick. Like, if Yamamoto is what we expect him to be with that whole package, like yeah, this is gonna really set EBO up nicely, even with losing Strider. On the flip side, if Yamamoto, he's not the biggest dude, and a comp I've heard kind of for a body types like Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray has not been able to stay healthy consistently throughout his career. If he can't stay healthy, if we're really counting on him for like 140 innings a year. Then I feel less sure about this for EBO unless like McLean or Meyer just go gangbusters and just really like become like a top 25, 30 dynasty asset or something like that. At the same time, what I will say about Strider, like number one pitcher, right? The strikeouts are insane. Like he's shown he could be durable at the innings or everything. But I mean, I think Alcantara is kind of the cautionary tale here when you go and acquire a top pitcher for a top price, or like look at what just happened with Brandon Woodruff, right? All of a sudden his value just evaporated. Um, you know, God forbid, Strider throws fast. God forbid he throws out his arm or something. I mean, that can, change the trajectory here. Uh, I feel a bit better about acquiring a top hitter a top like 20 dynasty asset that's a hitter than a pitcher for that reason. But I think from a value perspective, like I get it for both sides. I think it's fine, and I get why they both wanted to do it. But man, like if I was Zane or Jake right now, I'd be holding my breath just on both ends about this trade. And off air, I kind of compared this to how you felt about making the Adley deal. How like you're going to be holding your breath, like you just gave up like the top dynasty catcher, right? And I think they'll be doing the same thing. The last thing I will say about Jake, though, I mean, Strider, Castillo, Gosman, Luzardo, and yeah, I have to say it, Blake Snell. That's a pretty damn good top five in a rotation. I thought starting pitching was the weakest part of his roster last year, and boy, did he go out and get the top guy to help fix that. So. Good for him there. And it's going to make him that much more difficult to dethrone. But yeah, it doesn't come without risk. Um,
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is just a really ballsy trade on both sides, and it's just kind of fun to see something like that.
yeah, and I'd really be interested in, and we'll hear it in a second, how it was conceived because you compared it off air to the Tatis story deal from 2020. And that one came about in like a 24-hour span. And I wonder, I don't know if this has been in talks for a while. I mean, Zane publicly posted about Strider uh like on Saturday afternoon, and by Saturday or Sunday morning, he was gone. And I think Zane knew Saturday night that they were going to accept that trade. Um, I also wondered this is one of those things where both teams should have sat on this a little while longer and really thought it through, or did this just kind of like, you know, was there just kind of a gut reaction here and they just went for it? That's just what I want to figure out because uh sometimes not thinking it through can maybe lead to a little regret down the road. I don't know.
We will see. It is an interesting trade either way.
Yeah.
Um, so before we get to that interview, there were three different Ruthvik trades on Sunday. And I missed all of them. I was out skiing, so I was kind of very surprised to see all of them. I know Ruthvik has just been kind of trying to get uh, just kind of move on from some guys and move some guys around. And he certainly did that. And these are some interesting deals. Let's start out with the one that we teased earlier. He sent Ryan Mountcastle and Davis Schneider to Anthony for Tyler O'Neill, who's an interesting guy. I know I've been targeting him at various points.
Yeah, I think this is I mean, they're virtually even in my opinion. I think Mountcastle might be a little safer given his more recent performance. O'Neill hasn't been as good recently, but I think the upside with O'Neill is higher. I have some playing time concerns with Mountcastle, right? Like in previous years, there wasn't really a ton of competition around, and he was young, he was going to play. The Orioles are really stacked right now with bats. I mean, Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, Ryan O'Hearn are all going to figure in that first base DH mix. So, plus, like the Orioles pushing back the fences has hurt Mountcastle more than anybody else. I think it was appropriate for Ruthvik to move off of him, but I also think he's a fine player. I've never been the biggest Tyler O'Neill guy, but I do think there's some upside here. And I think Boston's a good landing spot for him. I think he just really needed to get out of St. Louis. It wasn't working there. So I think there could be a pretty decent chance of a rebound. Ruthvik needed an outfielder. He did get another first baseman later, which we'll talk about. So I think it's a good even trade for both sides. Like I don't have any issues with it. I do think O'Neill should get some nice run in Boston, and I'm interested to see if he bounces back higher ceiling, but I think really higher risk with O'Neill that it just doesn't work out. And if it really doesn't work out, maybe they just DFA him in the middle of the year. This is the last year of his deal, so I think he has that type of downside.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, yeah, O'Neill has had two kind of unhealthy and not the most productive years in a row. However, 2021 was just kind of magical for him, and that's That was kind of always going to be an unsustainable season, but his K rate and walk rate have each gotten better in each of the two seasons since then. So I still think there could be something there for the Red Sox.
No, I agree.
We'll
Under the hood looks very good. He just wasn't getting the results.
under the hood, very good. Um,
Yeah.
yes. But yeah, so we'll see about that one. Two more Ruthvik trades. Up next, he sent Craig Kimbrell to EBO for a second rounder and a conditional third, based on if Kimbrell gets 10 saves, then which we're expecting him to, but I think that's some fair. I think that's a fair ask for EBO, just in case he does not end up getting saves in Baltimore like we think he will. Um, and yeah, EBO is kind of building around the edges again. Uh, they got another closer.
Not
Uh,
another closer. They didn't have a reliever before this.
oh God, they don't have. Yeah, and they had Bob Steve prior to this,
They
and
picked him up.
maybe
Yeah.
yeah, they picked him up a couple days before this. He might be the closer in Anaheim. I think he is projected, at least according to ESPN, which I mean, that doesn't mean anything. To be the closer. Fun fact, I took him in our closers draft, so I'm feeling good about that if he ends up getting the bulk of the saves in Anaheim the next year or two. But yes, that was a need for EBO, and that if he can flip saves for him once or twice this year, that could be something.
Yeah, and Ruthvik, I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, like has just an absolutely insane bullpen. So, yeah, I think this is a fine gamble for EBO, and like if he doesn't pan out for Baltimore, they could just move on. If they decide, I think there's a number of interesting potential closer candidates. I know they traded away one in DL Hall, but I think Tyler Wells could step into that role because I don't think he has a rotation spot anymore, and I think he has closed some games out a little bit for Baltimore before, so um, I think that condition was good. But yeah, like a solid trade all around. I don't really have much to say.
Yeah, fair enough. The last one's a big one. Um, in this, and it was a very interesting one. Ruthvik traded his first to Eric for Christian Walker and Dustin Harris. Um, Christian Walker, um, feels like I don't know. I feel like he could have gotten more for Christian Walker. He is 32, so that's a little older than we thought. But he's coming off of back-to-back really strong seasons. First baseman, 30 homers in back-to-back seasons, doesn't strike out very much. He even stole 11 bases this past season, which was pretty cool. Just a big slugging, power hitting guy. And Eric's, he's got plenty of power in his lineup already, with guys like Teoscar and Jose Ramirez, and maybe Ellie hits 30 home runs this year. And even, did you know Lane Thomas hit 28 home runs last year?
I did.
Yeah, that's kind of insane. Lane Thomas, maybe the most underrated player in baseball. Um,
Oh, I wouldn't go that far, but he had a very good year.
I like him a lot. He's a good hitter. Um, but yeah, so Christian Walker, I guess, Eric's got a lot of bats on his team. I feel like he didn't need to get rid of Christian Walker. So the first, getting up a first for him, Ruthvik that could be a borderline lottery pick. Um, I don't know. I'm not really sure what Eric was doing there. The prospect, who's the prospect?
Dustin Harris, I think.
Dustin Harris. Yeah, he's not really much of anything. So I guess Eric is just kind of shortening up his bench and um, getting a decent pick in return. But I think that Walker's a fantastic get for Ruthvik.
Yeah, I think Walker's really underrated. Fantastic kid. He does turn 33 later this year, so or in March, so he's a little on the older side, but you're right. The plate skills are fantastic. 33 homers, 103 ribbies last year at 86 runs, 11 steals, and only a 19.2% K rate. I mean, that's fantastic. That lineup got better and is only going to get better, I think. So more runs and ribby opportunities. Ruthvik needed a first baseman. I think he upgraded there. It's funny, Ruthvik was telling me he thought he overpaid with the pick. I think this is a really fair price for him. I'm a little surprised that Eric gave him up. It'd be one thing if there was some obvious skills degradation, and I haven't really seen anything to that effect. Although I could do a closer look here quickly. Actually, so his Statcast page was a bit worse than the year before. And I wonder maybe if Eric's like, hey, I'd rather get rid of him a year early than a year late. Um, but like I think Walker's just going to continue to be solid at least for another couple years. I don't really see a reason why he can't continue to hit well.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that you kind of hit the nail on the head trading him a year early rather than a year late. Um, that's something I feel like Eric does better than the rest of us.
Yeah.
Um, move he's good at moving on from guys. Um um I think Ruthvik is maybe the worst at that in the league, and I know I'm the second worst at that. So it's kind of, I guess it's an interesting landing spot. But I think if Ruthvik gets a great year out of Christian Walker, that could be the difference between playoffs and no playoffs.
Right. I will say this too about Eric. He's putting a lot of faith in that Vinny P comeback, because that's his only first base eligible player right now. Um, so if Vinny P has some issues bouncing back from that shoulder surgery, and I know we all think, oh, hey, he's going to be healthy, he's going to be great. It's not an easy surgery to come back from. A shoulder surgery for a power hitter. It's just, I wonder if there's a backup plan if that doesn't go well. But I think it's probably a fair value, and like, you know what, if you can get a first round pick for a 33-year-old and you think a decline's coming, I have no issue with that. But I also get why Ruthvik made this deal. I mean, this feels plenty fair.
Yeah, fair enough. Looking through, I think Eric needs a starting pitcher, kind of bad. I mean, Burns and Kirby is a fantastic top two, but outside of that, there's a lot that he's kind of banking on. Like Glasnow, Glasnow is great when he's healthy, but we're gonna see how healthy he is this year. This is kind of a big year for him. Hunter Green, this is a big year to see if he's an ace or if he's just like a number three guy. It's kind of a mediocre 2023 and not a healthy 2023 either. Um, so he's kind of a wait and see. Verlander showed some cracks this year for the first time ever. His K rate was below 8 for really the first time since his, I guess, second peak. Um, and before that, yeah, since like his little mini slump towards the end of his Detroit tenure, and before that, it was early career when he was 25. Um, and the ERA was still fine, but some of the profs did not look great. So this could be, and he's 40, so I'm not really sure he's got another great season left in him. And then he's just kind of got some guys. Chris Sale, I don't buy into really, and if so, then it'll be in a Glasnow situation where maybe it's in 110 innings. Um, and then it's like maybe Michael King is a good starting pitcher. I think he could be. Maybe Edward Cabrera is a good starting pitcher. Um, it's interesting. I think he needs a Maeda type. I don't know.
It's funny because he had Maeda for most of last year and then cut him around playoff time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. Even Burns, like, and don't get me wrong, like I love Burns. I think he had a really great second half of the year. And obviously he's an Oriole now, so I really love him. If you look at the numbers for Burns, like since his Cy Young year, it's kind of a little bit of skills degradation year by year. Um, it's got me a little concerned, which is why I'm kind of all right with the fact that the Orioles didn't do like a trade and extension immediately type of deal. As an aside, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's like Burns and Kirby, great one too. Um, Here's a fun fact, I want to have you guess. Tyler Glasnow had four full seasons for Tampa plus a shortened year. Um, what do you think how many times did he crack 100 innings?
Um, 4 full seasons plus the 2020. I'm gonna guess he did that once. He cracked 100 innings once.
Exactly once. Uh, he had a career high in innings last year is 120. That's a
Uh,
career high, and it was fantastic what he did in 120 innings. Like, do not get me wrong, but man, I'm not predicting him for more than like 140. And that's the exact problem I was saying with Yamamoto, right? Is the worst case I think with Yamamoto is that he's just this 140 inning guy. He's great in 140 innings, but he's not getting you that extra 60, 70 innings that really can make up a lot of good fantasy value. So yeah, that's kind of my concern with him. And I think with a lot of these guys are injury risks. Michael King, part of the reason that the Yankees hadn't really made him a starter before was because he couldn't stay healthy. So they kind of used him in the bullpen because that helped keep him healthy. So I think he's a risk there. And then we didn't even talk about the guys he has in the IL, right? Scherzer is going to miss is dealing with a back issue, and he's ancient. Like he's going to miss the first half of the year. DeGrom has an arm issue. He's always had trouble staying healthy. I mean, he had TJ. He'll be back in the middle of the year, but like he can't stay healthy. Otani's now having another big arm injury. I mean, who knows what that's going to look like when he comes back? I mean, it's just
yeah, I mean, yeah, Otani,
weird.
yeah, there's another guy he's missing for all of this year in the rotation at least.
Yeah, and it's also like these guys are kind of old. I mean, Sale's like in his mid 30. I think he's like 34 now. Like Verlander's ancient, DeGrom's ancient, Scherzer's ancient. Uh, you know, I not that he's a big part of his rotation, but Michael Wacha's kind of old now. Eric Fetty might not be super old, but like, yeah. It reminds me of your rotation with a little less stability, I'll be honest. And
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe there's a Lane Thomas, Eduardo Rodriguez deal out there.
oh shit, I think I would take that all day if I was him.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would maybe ask for a little more, but I think it could be kind of fair. And it could kind of fit, there's teams are needing outfielders. I was talking about this with Ruthvik today. Teams are kind of starting to realize that we all need outfielders. And if you can trade a team an outfielder, then you could get a decent return.
Yeah, five outfielders in a 12-team league is not easy to fill. That's 60 outfielders. And on any given day in Major League Baseball, you have 90 outfielders starting, and a good chunk of those are not guys that you want to really be using in fantasy. So it is not an easy position to fill. You're
That
absolutely
is true.
I've been trying to trade bats for a good chunk of the offseason, and one of the things I always come back to when someone asks for one of my outfielders is like, well, I don't really know how I'm going to replace that outfielder.
Yeah, no, it's tough. And like I'm looking at my team and I've got three great outfielders and then I'm just kind of filling in gaps the rest of the way. And I'm feeling like I need an outfielder, but at the same time I feel like I've got one of the better outfield groups in the league when I look around and maybe it'd be hard to uh yeah, it's hard to get another one.
My biggest fear is that Betts only plays second base this year and loses that outfield eligibility. It's going to be really tough if that happens for me.
That would be a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got Tatis in the outfield now, um,
That helps a lot.
which I'm I was shocked to discover that he was well, and this is something I found out kind of at the end of last year, but not only was he moved to the outfield, he was like one of the best defensive outfielders.
Yeah, I mean, Dude's just an athlete, and he wasn't the best defensive shortstop. I think right field where he played is a better home for him, and I think he wants to play some center. And I wouldn't be surprised now that Trent Grisham's gone if they move him to center. But yeah, I mean he's an athlete. It doesn't surprise. Like I think he could play anywhere on the diamond and be really good. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I tend to agree.
did he win a Gold Glove or was he a Gold Glove finalist? Like, it wouldn't surprise me if he won it.
I wouldn't surprise me if he won it. Yeah. I don't think he won. I'm
He
pretty
did.
sure
He did.
he
He did.
did. Well,
Yeah. Um, there you
yeah,
go.
no, and it was a deserving one too.
Yeah, he fits much better out there in the outfield. Uh,
Right. But yes, we've gone through these guys here. Anything else we want to talk about before we get into the interview?
I will say it's certainly interesting that some of these trades have picked up. I mean, I was saying it all off season. Like, I hope it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen at some point, and it finally did. So I appreciate that happening. It,
All
it
it took
makes
was the hockey all-star break.
that helps. And I think you have some teams who are kind of out of it in Gallardo now, who are kind of looking towards next year. Um, so I certainly think that helps. Um, but like, yeah, I think the draft kind of got some people back into it a little excited, and then I think these trades have gotten people hyped too. But um, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's another little trade push before the season starts. I think it might be a little silent for a little bit here and now, but there's still time. Season doesn't start for I guess a month and a half before the Dodgers and Padres in Japan, and then a little less than 2 months for the rest of the team. So uh, I wouldn't be surprised if some stuff happens in between now and then. And not to mention, um, and we have to figure this out for sure. But keep an eye out for this. In 10 days is February 15th. That was the day we said we could put some of these injured players or players who ESPN has listed as out who might not actually be out on the IL. So that could open up some roster spots and some potential moves as well. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, no, very true. That could be yeah, a lot of movement around that time. A lot of these guys coming off free agency. That's a good idea. I should add someone now to fill that empty spot before it's too late.
Well,
Um,
Eric already added somebody earlier while you were at that open spot. So yeah, it's
yeah,
not that I
yeah,
think you
Joe
really
Kelly.
wanted Joe Kelly, but
No, and I'm between a few starting pitchers or just like, promoting Caminero. Um,
I'll be honest. And obviously this doesn't need to be in a recording, but I don't think Caminero is going to start this season at the majors.
yeah, I don't think he is either.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a story for my a bit of a transition year for me that we can talk about at another time. But yes, with that all out of the way, we have an interview with EBO to get to. It's always exciting to get this team on. So after the break, it's going to be, I'm sure, a very well thought out, very long, lengthy interview, but it's always fun. And especially when it's a deal this big.
Yeah, I know Cam for editing purposes always hates when Zane and I are in the same Zoom room, but uh hopefully this doesn't go too bad for you. Best of luck editing, my friend.
All right, we'll see you on the flip side.
Everything you gotta say, I'll take it. It's anything you wanna pay, anything you wanna do. Believe me when I tell you that I want it to. You know that I'll be.
All right, we are back now with the executive batting order, fresh off of a massive trade. We just talked about it in the last segment. Let's recap. Let's recap the deal one more time. Sahil, you probably have it open. I do not. But
Yes, I do have it open. Well, there's actually two deals I want to talk about here, but let's start with the big headliner. Um, EBO agreed to trade Spencer Strider to Bo with the Flow for Yoshi Yamamoto, Matt McLean, Marcelo Meyer, and Jake's 2025 first round pick. What?
Absolutely insane deal. So we'll be talking about that. But yes, let's yeah, Zane and Sully, you are on. How are you both doing today? Welcome back to the pod.
It's good to be here. I'm doing good. I didn't expect this to happen, so I'm kind of in as much shock as you guys, to be quite honest.
Let it prove to you all that any player can move in this league. Not that you
I
all
mean,
needed me to prove that at this point. Jesus Christ.
I mean, yeah, you've yeah, Zane, you have moved Otani, you have moved now Strider, Trey Turner, you've moved to T. So there's yeah,
Mookie
really
Betts.
anyone can move in
Thank
this
you for
league.
him.
I only really regret, like strongly regret Otani, obviously. Tatis, I'm still mostly at peace at. I mean, he had an incredible year last year, but I think that he's got more headache to come.
Yep, certainly fair enough. But yes, this deal, I guess for starters, me and Sahil had talked uh in the lead up to the draft. We were like, okay, EBO is going to trade up to number one to take Yamamoto. They're going to get Yamamoto somehow. Um, yeah, once Jake took Yamamoto, we were like, okay, EBO is going to get Yamamoto somehow. We know you like Yamamoto, Zane. Why don't you talk about Yamamoto and how long you've been trying to get him, even going back to before the draft?
Yeah, honestly, I gave up on trying to get him in this league. I didn't expect to pursue him at all. But what happened was I put out the feeler to see if anyone was willing to overpay for Strider, just because honestly, as long as we're still getting we're still getting up to our point of being in contention for the 6th seed, finished in the 7th seed last year, but or 8th seed, I don't remember, but regardless, there was a massive drop off from 7 and 8 to from 6. So we're kind of in a transitionary phase. Strider, I think he might have a Verlander type career at best, but at worst, I could see him continuing to not or outperform in his peripherals versus on the field. So I was curious what I could get offered out there. Like if there's a clear value in, I would consider it. And me and Sully were like, we have a dynasty number one starting pitcher, like no worries at all. But Jake had the most compelling one. He offered a lot of different stuff, but when he said Yamamoto, it caught my eye immediately. He also offered Luis Castillo. So if the draft lottery didn't screw us, then maybe we could have had Dylan Cruz, Yamamoto, and Spencer Strider, and no Max Clark. But it did screw us. So no, or like maybe we would have gotten Castillo in this deal instead. Regardless, Yamamoto stuck out to me right away because this is the best pitcher I've seen come over from Japan to this point. And with his walk rate and his stuff, I just think it's going to translate exceptionally well. The Dodgers invested so much money into him, just an ungodly amount. And you have this guy now who's going to be the ace of the evil empire for, I mean, they'll be paying him to be the ace for a decade. Hopefully he is for a long time, but for the next few years, I expect top 10 production from him. And if I expect similar production from him as Strider, and they're 2 months apart, I had to engage it in what we could get here. So we dove into it more. We didn't have a second baseman prior to acquiring McLean. Marcelo Meyer, I think, was a great grab too, and then we got a first. So it's just like, okay, the value is too overwhelming. And the key for me there is that Yamamoto, I think, could be ranked above Spencer Strider by the end of this year. It could go wrong. I mean, there's a lot of noise here to sift through, but there's so much pointing me towards him being a similarly valuable asset that I was like, man, we need to get more value on this team again.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how me and Sahil broke it down too. I mean, with Yamamoto being basically the same age as Strider, the Dodgers, put so much capital into him. The smartest team in baseball gave him the biggest contract ever for a pitcher. I certainly buy the stuff. It certainly feels legit. He could be just as good as Strider, and then I like McLean a lot, and then the rest of the pieces do really feel. It feels like a really solid return. How long did it take for this deal to come to fruition, and did any other teams make any sort of offers?
I mean, it really, to me, I believe it really, from when Zane first proposed it to when we finalized it, it was only a couple days, right, Zane? I mean, it didn't take long because I even texted Zane, like, he's like, I'm putting out feelers for Strider, and Jake offered Yamamoto, and I'm like, I mean, as much as I love Yamamoto, to move Strider, it's got to be like I cannot, like the Godfather deal, like it's an offer I can't refuse. And then all of a sudden he said Jake's willing to add to Yamamoto. Then I'm like, oh man, here we go. And I was in, and it really came together over the course, I think, like 2 days. Am I wrong, Zane?
No, yeah, it was just like I mean, I sent out the feeler on a Friday night, and by Sunday afternoon, no, Sunday morning, I think I had dealt him. So it moved quickly. Me and Sully were very much on board together the whole time. There was one other bidder. We can talk about that a little bit. And Sully was actually starting to move towards the value that was being offered there. But that also makes sense that they stepped out because the offer was another. I think it would have been Gunnar Churio all over again.
Were you referring to me?
Yes.
Yeah,
That
I
would be
mean,
correct.
so
To
I will
formalize
say,
anything, but
I
that was
will
the
say,
biggest
yeah,
bid.
when you presented the first offer of what it would have to take, I'll be honest, I knew then that I wasn't going to be the one who got Spencer Strider. I already felt uncomfortable with the asking price. I mean, you're asking for like Albies and Gallon and Hader and Woodruff with that first offer. And my logic is like, I think Albies is a top two dynasty second baseman. I think Zach Allen's a top 10-ish dynasty starting pitcher. And I think Josh Hader is like a top three reliever right now. And then I was like, that already felt like a little too much to give up. And then you wanted like Castellanos, and then there's some discussion of other pieces and kind of floating stuff around. And I was like, just like it's a lot of depth just to kind of take off the roster. And I get that like Strider is like a unique talent, but you don't win just by having a couple of elite players. You win by having the depth, to overcome injuries and ineffectiveness and whatever else throughout the season, and just to be able to put up a sheer number of volume stats. So, yeah, once and honestly, I mean, I think Jake gave you all a better offer. I mean, I think the one thing I didn't hear too much about here either was like the age of these players. I mean, like every player you acquired was 25 or younger, and then you got that first round pick as well. Not that some of the assets I would have given you would have been, super old or anything. I mean, some of them in their early 30s, but Albies is 26, I think, and or 27 now, and Gallon's 27, 28. But I mean, nobody matching the age of the guys that you got. And I do think Yamamoto has a higher upside than anybody I could have traded you. So yeah, I thought the question. I knew I wasn't going to close the deal with you from pretty early on, but then I thought the question was, would you all actually trade Strider? But then knowing Zane, I was like, yeah, we probably would. I mean, if the right offer comes along, I think that's just your mentality, which is a good one to have because I think it served you very well in a lot of deals. But um, yeah, and then I guess speaking of suitors here, I guess there was somebody else in this chat room here who wasn't maybe wasn't a big suitor, but you did make him an interesting offer. And I'd like him to talk about that.
Yeah, so I was offered Strider for Aaron Judge. I'm not sure if it was 1-for-1. I didn't really probe. Reading the quote back, reading the message back from Zane to quote, for what it's worth, one Yankee outfielder could end the Strider sweepstakes immediately, I do believe. Offers we're shopping on are more so top 25 and top 50, top 75 asset. I gave it some thought. And Zane was there. Would this have been a 1-for-1 offer, or would you have wanted more in return?
That's a good question. When I said a Yankee outfielder could end the bidding, I meant it as a double entendre, knowing that Juan Soto is as untouchable as it gets. Oops.
Oh, it's fine. I read this as Judge. I had completely forgotten that Soto was on the Yankees now.
Yes. So either of them, I thought were compelling, and probably both I would value at the same. And Soto I value higher for sure.
Oh yeah.
Judge
Agreed.
us as a 1-for-1 would be really interesting because it would really fix our lineup, but we would have to really take on a big pitching loss. So I thought that one's pretty even, but for our timeline, it might have been better to go with the Yamamoto deal. Was that where you were at, Sully?
Oh yeah, for me too. I was like, yeah. I mean, Soto is intriguing, Judge is intriguing, but I feel like because like we talked about, we didn't want to trade Strider unless, and I'll use this analogy again. I said we got the Godfather deal, like we just could not pass it up because I mean I'm in the mentality of I don't like making trades just to make trades. I know Sahil, you're kind of the opposite of that sometimes, in a loving way. I promise that's a loving way, but it's more like I don't. I mean, and then that mentality is something I've had to learn playing from fantasy as opposed to real life, getting attached to players. Like so I was like, man, I just don't want to trade him unless we get, like I said, the biggest offer, that way more than I ever thought we would, and then we did, and I just think the depth of what we got is going to help our team way more than a singular player because we've got a couple aces coming. We got Yuri Perez, Tarek Skubal. I'm not saying they're going to be Spencer Strider, but we've got enough ace level pitching in the pipeline that if we could fix our second base problem with a guy who doesn't turn 25 until August and who put up a 128 WRC plus last year in a few hundred at bats. Then plus Marcelo Meyer, who was in contention to be the number 1 overall pick in his draft and had a bad year because he hurt his shoulder and played through it. We could get a bounce back there, and then obviously a first round pick is just kind of gravy at that point. So it was really like I just thought the depth was too much to pass up, and it just helps out the rest of our lineup so much better than a 1-for-1 star for star.
Absolutely. And I think I'm going to start referring to this as the Godfather deal in the future. That's a great nickname for this trade. And that really is what it feels like. Absolutely. With that return. Yeah, I know. Yes. Going back to Judge, I almost made the joke something like, oh, I don't think I own Everson Pereira anymore when you're asking about a certain Yankee outfielder.
I don't know. What was Estevan Florial?
Estevan Florial. I think I might have owned him at one point too. But yeah, I think it would have been interesting. I like it value-wise. I think I just couldn't have parted with another bat, especially one of my top tier bats.
Yeah.
And I think you got a better deal in the end anyway.
For the record, I told Cam that he should have accepted Judge for Judge or Strider if it was offered to him. I told him it wasn't close.
I think value-wise it makes sense. I just think the way my team is constructed, I need to add a bat, not subtract one.
Yeah, and also,
Sorry, go ahead, Zane.
You're coming from in the dynasty perspective, Sahil, and then Cam, I get why you didn't entertain it as much due to your team comp. And then the one other thing I wanted to add, what was it? I think it was just the fact that, think about it from Jake's perspective, how easy this was. If you change how you look at the assets a bit, this is, from Jake's perspective, you giving up your number 2 overall pick that you got in a trade last year, thinking it would be a late first. Matt McClain, who he definitely wasn't as high on as he is now this time last year. Late first, which if you're Jake, I think I'm assuming that's number 12, and I'm going for the three-peat. That you just have to have that mentality. And then Marcelo Meyer, the guy who bothered you by having a down season in the minors and actually getting surpassed in stock for some people by Jackson Jobe, who got laughed out of the room a couple years ago. That's all I'm giving up for Spencer Strider. Shit, yeah, I got to do it. Sahil's over here offering a quarter of his team. Pam, I had to show up and ask for a top 10 dynasty asset. And for Jake, if you take out the number 2 overall pick from this year's rookie draft, he's giving up Matt McClain, Meyer, and a first for Strider. It's night and day. Yamamoto was a miracle asset.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like it's a high risk, high reward for both of you, right? If the only thing Jake has to show for this trade now is Strider, which I'm not saying in a bad way, but like if something were to happen to Strider, I mean he's boned. And if but and I think for you all, if something happens to Yamamoto, you know, he's not as effective as we think he is, you know, injury strikes, whatever. Like there are other assets in this deal that could still make it look pretty solid for you. But like, yeah, I mean, I think this trade, yeah, it's
the Dot and EBO are out $325 million.
And Sahil, that's actually that's a really good point about why I liked this deal so much. Is that, you know, even if Yamamoto is, I think I remember you were texting Zane and he related to me that, like, you know, okay, let's say he becomes like a number, like the best number 3 starter in the leader, like the worst number 2, like that kind of production. Yeah, we lose this deal from an overall value perspective, but our pitching depth, in my opinion, is strong enough to where the added, you know, bat assets and that first round pick is enough to, I'll say, lessen the blow of like, we'll make it like a smaller loss rather than like with Jake, if, like you said, Spencer Strider, you know, tears his UCL or something, then he's screwed. But for me, I feel like we have a much higher floor on this deal. And if a much higher, I mean, maybe not a higher floor, but we have enough extra pieces to make the hurt a little bit less if Yamamoto doesn't become the superstar me and Zane both think he can be.
Right. You diversified your risk, but from Jake's perspective, he just won a championship and he just added the best pitcher in baseball. And like, yeah, he had to give up some pieces, but like that's a risk he can take.
The minor win now downgrade. Or like minor win now asset sacrifice.
Best pitcher of baseball. This is Matt Manning erasure. I won't have any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, where's Spencer Strider's combined no-hitter?
Yeah, exactly.
Man, yeah, no, it is really interesting for sure. God, Matt Manning. Is he still on your team? He is, right?
Yes.
He will retire. He will retire an EBO draftee on the roster.
And that might only be in a couple of years, unfortunately. He might retire.
If he doesn't figure out the fastball, he's in big trouble. But the slider, that came along in a way that I did not expect. Also, just another aside on EBO pitching real quick. Sahil is in on the Shane Bieber hype a little bit. He made a quick call because Bieber's velo is up. And I just want to say, if Bieber has a good year, don't give up on the guys who are absolute monsters when they have a down year. And I'm very happy to have him as our number 5 or 6 pitcher right now as on the upswing team.
But for the record, it was all velo with me. He's obviously a very good pitcher, but if he didn't have the velocity, you've seen what
the velo is huge.
But if that velo is back, he's a good pitcher.
He's working with Driveline this offseason, I saw, so he's getting his velo back up.
He's still 28 years old. Jesus God.
I know it's insane.
I mean, he's turning 29, but
I could have sworn he was like 32.
It's a miracle for EBO again. So yeah, I think that's about all there is on the Yamamoto Strider bit.
can we talk about the Cy Young Award winner you acquired too? Like, because that's in like any other episode, that would be like the lead is like, hey, EBO acquires the 2022 NL Cy Young Award winner, but no, like.
Yeah, I thought, you know what? I thought you were going to ask about Craig Kimbrell first, but no. Sandy Alcantara sitting on the IL for the year. Easy investment for us. We have the space. One IL space isn't going to make or break our season. And honestly, I'm looking down our rotation right now, and I see a lot of guys I'm confident in, but then I kind of assume that one of Mize or Manning is not going to make it this year. The law of averages says that all three of Skubal, Mize, and Manning cannot become fantasy relevant pitchers. And this is the year for me. This is the year I got to see. So Alcantara, yeah, future. Sorry, I just processed that. But
Yeah.
Alcantara slant like by having him in the IL, I can just assume that I'm slotting him in to one of those two slots next year. And I did this with the Jonesy brothers with Walker Buehler. I kind of assumed that one of Verlander and Scherzer would burn out after 2023. Looks like Scherzer is going to be the one to burn out. And I have Walker Buehler to slowly integrate into the rotation there. So trying to take the same strategy here. It is funny that we have Kenta Maeda in the mix too. So we're just going to be starting. Oh my God. Yeah. We got to be careful because the Tigers, I don't necessarily even think are going to win their division. And we're starting all four of the main starting pitchers, excluding fucking Jack Flaherty. But there's a chance Jack Flaherty ends up being the number 1 or 2 or 3 on the Tigers. If he's the 1, it's bad, but he could be the 2 or 3. And that is not the guy we're starting. So Alcantara, yeah, I think we should still be shopping on Woodruff too. I just don't want to spend a first on him, Sahil. So that's been the conundrum there.
You can work something out. I don't know if he's necessarily going to require a first. You have enough interesting assets. We could figure something out. But he is definitely available, and we probably need to talk about that more.
Yeah, he's too.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I mean, I think. Well, Zane and I kind of talked about, or not Zane and I, Cam and I talked about this on the earlier segment. I see why I see both sides of the steal. But I mean, it's hard to argue with acquiring a former Cy Young Award winner and somebody upside that comes with him. And you're right, you know, I mean, obviously playing for this year to a degree, but I think 2025 is really when I'm starting to look at EBO and think, all right, like, this window's wide open here, and I think Alcantara, a healthy version of Alcantara, can provide that innings and some of that stability. But I mean, I get why Anthony made it, right? Alcantara's coming off a down year, and then he got hurt. I mean, there was inherent risk with the pitcher coming off of Tommy John, like cashing out for a 25-year-old pitcher who I think you and I seem to be a little more down on than others, but
Greg scared me. Greg scared me and made me think, oh my God, the Seattle fan likes Brian Wu more. What have I done? I tried so hard to get Miller. Now I need to sell him while he's still the value I perceive him at right now, just in case he goes back down. I can't lose on this one.
Well, so I will say the one thing that kind of made me hesitate a little bit, and this was after the trade, was seeing that. So like one of Bryce Miller's big issues last year was like he can't get lefties out. And he's introducing a splitter like specifically to like use against lefties, and now I'm like,
yeah, I can see that for from Anthony's perspective, because if you think that Alcantara won't come back the same way, or if you just think the year loss is just too much to eat for your roster, then I can see like the ceiling kind of him slotting in and becoming that next guy with Freddie Peralta. Ober's there too. So he's got a couple guys that are kind of in that mix, but it's hard to get young pitching in this league.
Yeah.
And we did a good job striking while the iron was hot when young pitchers were available last year. We even worked so hard to get Joe Ryan off of Alex after Alex swiped Bobby Miller off of us. We had to make amends there. And then like getting Shane Bieber in the fold while he's still under 30, letting Yuri Perez promote and develop. Perik Skubal came back from injury and was excellent. And then
The most valuable pitcher in the
Imanaga's not
league, actually.
not young, but Imanaga in the draft, I was eager to get my hands on too. So it's given us a lot of flexibility to make deals around. Still a couple guys that'll age out at some point or maybe stink out of our roster like Kikuchi, Maeda, but and then obviously Manning and Mize, but I'm pretty hopeful to see how those guys do too. And hell, we finally have 2 saves relievers again, so we might win a couple more games there alone.
That was a bit. Joe Ryan was a big reason why I think I was a bit comfortable with this field. Because I talked about their pitching depth before. Like, I just feel like our floor is so high with what we have. I mean, we have upside players. We got Skubal, Yuri Perez, and then Yamamoto, and I feel like that's what also separated your deal, your offer, Sahil, even if you didn't think you were going to be able to go through with it from the deal that we end up going with Jake. It was just like, do I go with older, more established players that I know are good and will probably continue to be good, or do I shoot for the moon? And I feel like if we were already in the playoffs like last year and then looking to take another step up, maybe I go with the more proven talent. But I feel like since we're still in the, just out of the playoffs, trying to go for it, I felt like, we went with the upside of the younger players. And I'm a huge Matt McLain fan. I really think that was, Yamamoto's the prize, right? We all know that. But I really think Matt McLain is going to be possibly the best value of this deal based on he was almost like a throw-in at one point. I was like, oh, let's just see if we can get Matt McLain off them. And Zane was like, yeah, Jake's in. And I'm like, oh, great. I mean, he's projected as a 2020 player, drive and score 70 to 80 runs. I mean, and he doesn't turn 25 until August. So I just really, really feel like that's an underrated part of this deal that may get overlooked.
Yeah, I think he's a top 5 dynasty second baseman. I think he's clearly the second best asset in the deal. I don't think he's somebody who should be overlooked at all. I think if anything, the asset that might be overlooked in that deal is Marcelo Meyer. I mean, I noticed Shine's kind of come off of him a little bit, and he was like the top player in a draft that I don't think was particularly good, and there are other drafts that I think were better both before and after, but I still think you could develop into a really solid player. But yeah, I mean, I think getting McLean was a home run. I think he's easily a top 5 dynasty second baseman, and I don't think it's I think there's a top 5 and then there's a clear break after that.
Yeah, Meyer was at first. I was kind of worried because of the year he had last year. Obviously, didn't do too well when he got promoted. But then I looked more into it because I knew he hurt his shoulder, but I didn't know if that was post bad year and then he got hurt, or if his shoulder was affecting him. And I found an article. I forgot what newspaper it was in or website, but it said he recalled in an interview the exact day he injured his shoulder, and it was like May 7th, and he didn't get put on the season-ending, the minor league IL until like I think July or something. And so I looked into it. He's like, yeah, I was sliding into third, legging out a triple. I felt something pop in my shoulder. It wasn't hurting bad enough so I tried to play through it, but he's like, I should have gotten the surgery right away instead of waiting. So I really feel like the reason his production was so bad was because he was playing through an injured shoulder. So I really think that now that he'll have like a full year and a half to get healthy or whatever, or maybe just over a year, then he could come back to being he was hitting I think like an 860-ish OPS or something like that in high A ball before he got promoted. So if he can come back healthy, I think, again, not to use the home run pun, but absolutely would be a home run for us. And then the first is just, cherry on top.
No, absolutely. Cam, do you have any other questions? The call ends in about 5 minutes, and I can send out another link, but
I don't think I have any more questions. Just other than that, do you have any further plans for this off season? And yeah, what I guess what's your outlook for 2024 and the rest of your off season?
If you're listening, you can have Taylor Ward for Starling Marte for a pick. We don't need two outfielders projected for sub 120 hits, but both provide very interesting upside. And then we're getting close to done. I think the hitters on our roster are starting to look a bit more equivalent to my Jonesy Bros team in terms of upside, which makes me feel good. That's a 10-teamer. We performed really well last year. We were the 1 seed in the regular season. And then the pitching, I feel very excited about. It's still a year where I'm kind of targeting 6 seed a bit more as I try to figure out what these Tigers look like. Torkelson and Skubal, I am in. Riley Green, I just want to make sure he can play a full season as he starts to age into he's not even aging into his prime, but I just want to make sure I can rely on him at a certain production. And if not, I'm going to have to figure out a way to pay for a better outfielder coming up here. And then
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Churio. Oh my God. Jackson Churio is going to be up this season. So we need to move an outfielder or two, and we need to start thinking about having our space for holds relievers. And yeah, I want to make the playoffs this year. I think that the 2022 bottom out was really beneficial to kickstarting this thing. Last year, we put so much hard work into rebuilding this thing. I really took a lot of influence from Andrew, who did such an incredible job with such a garbage roster. And I just feel like we have something to prove. So yeah, get this roster finalized for opening day. With guys on the IL, I assume we'll have our catcher streaming spot. I do not plan on holding Alejandro Kirk through another bad season. And Jake wisely hopped on him as a backup catcher to play that upside. And from here, we'll see how things go. I'm looking forward to being better this season, being in more games early in the season, and hopefully shifting somebody out of that. I mean, the top 6 is very sturdy in this league. We're going to have to see somebody take a step back and us take a step forward to make things interesting. But I'm hoping to make things interesting.
Well, you've got me week 2. That could be a big prove it week for you.
Oh my God. Well, we're going to be, who do we play week 1?
Connor.
Okay, we should be 1-1. I am. If we can't beat Connor, I'm going to go full wrestling right now. Connor, we got to beat you week 1, brother. So I need to beat you and your co-owner, Connor. And if we are not 1-0 going into that Cam matchup with a chance to be kind of the 2023 Lions and win a sneak one against a championship caliber team early on, hey, then I'll take 1-1 still. I mean, the Lions were 1-1 after 2 weeks, but God, I would like to be 2-0. So we have to be 1-0 to go 2-0, and I'm not banking on beating you, Cam.
We'll see. Anything could happen. But yeah, thank you both for coming on. It's been a real pleasure. Nice to talk to you, Sully, again. I know it's been a while. And yeah, EBO made the Godfather move, and they are, if not this year, then definitely next year, going to be right in that hunt.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us. And before we go, Jake made the Godfather move. We just accepted it. Shout out to Jake. That again, I'm very impressed.
This podcast is good.